You? A genius? The billionaire laughed loudly, slamming his hand on the marble table. Then solve this equation that even my best scientists couldn't understand. In the luxurious room, everyone burst out laughing. An uncomfortable silence fell when a shy look appeared in the corner. Richard Moreau's mansion sat atop a hill. Huge windows, marble everywhere, and a meticulously manicured garden. At night, warm lights blazed as if the house never slept. There, almost every day was a party. Important people entered, expensive cars parked in front, laughter echoing all the way to the street. Richard was the master of this spectacle. Tall, with neatly combed grey hair, a tailored suit, and a watch that shone brighter than it needed to. He walked with his chin held high, as if the marble floor were made just for his steps. When he spoke, it wasn't conversation. It was an announcement. "Time to welcome." He opened his arms, grinning. "No one wastes time here. Learn from me." He liked to listen to himself. He prided himself on being one of the smartest in the city. He took pleasure in proving it. He invited business people, politicians, and professors. He seated them all in the main room, facing a large library and a spotless blackboard. "The world belongs to those who solve problems," he said, raising his glass. "I solve them. The rest watch." His routine was simple and powerful. He woke up late, coffee served on china, quick meetings with advisors, dry phone calls, close the deal, cancel, send a call. In the afternoon, personal training, gallery visits, art purchases. At night, the mansion became a stage. Live music, expensive dishes, fawning guests, and he was at the center, laughing loudly. "Intelligence isn't luck," he repeated, staring at anyone nearby. "It's a level." He almost never said his name to the staff. "You, bring this." "You, hurry up." Discreet grimaces when a dish was late. Small humiliations in front of everyone. That seemed to feed his ego. Behind the heavy kitchen door, there was another world. Anna's world, short, with strong arms from lifting so many pots and pans, her hair tied in a hasty bun. Her eyes were tired but firm. She arrived before the sun, leaving when the room was already empty. "And good morning, Mrs. Lucia," she greeted the waitress, even in a hurry. "There's a big event today. Let's make it special." Anna had worked there for years. Almost no one knew her name. The cook, that was it. And yet, she carried on with dignity, organizing everything, tasting broths, adjusting the salt, ensuring each dish came out hot and beautiful. When something went wrong, she took a deep breath and fixed it. No drama, no excuses. At home, the reality was different. A simple little house, a roof that creaked in the rain, a noisy fan in the bedroom. On the wall, a calendar with bills scribbled in pencil. On the table, old notebooks. Gabriel, 12 years old, thin, dark hair always a bit messy, lively eyes that sparkled at any page with numbers. "Mom, look at this," he'd say, pointing to the scribbles. "If I turn it around, it'll be easier." "Adieu, son. I don't understand any of this," she'd laugh fondly, "but I trust you." Gabriel had a quiet routine. He woke up early, helped his mother as best he could, and studied with what he had, used paper, repurposed notebooks, and stubbed pencils. At night, when the power went out, he used a simple flashlight. It seemed as if nothing outside existed when the numbers began to speak to him. On festive days, Gabriel would go with his mother to the mansion. He would sit on a kitchen bench, away from the living room, with his notebook on his lap. Sometimes he would excuse himself to drink water next to the library. He would gaze at the tall bookshelves, the gilded bindings, the clean chalkboard. "One day, I'll write there," he would murmur shyly. "Shoo, boy, go back to the kitchen," a hurried waiter would scold. "He's my son," Anna would reply calmly. "Go sit down now." That night, the house was even fuller. The music was louder. The laughter was louder, the perfumes were more expensive. Richard strode through the room like a king. "We have special guests today," he said, tapping the crystal of his glass. "And an even better challenge." Anna straightened her apron, feeling her heart tighten without knowing why. She glanced at her son. He was quiet, fingers stained with graphite, notebook clutched to his chest. "Stay here, Gabriel. No wandering around the house." "Okay." Dinner began with the clinking of glasses. Waiters passed lightly, dishes steaming, piano music filling the gaps in conversation. The library was open, connecting the dining room through a wide door. At the back, a white canvas waited. The blackboard, too, clean, gleaming under the light of the chandeliers. Richard stood up. The cut of his suit followed his movement like a frame. He smirked and tapped his spoon against his glass. "Attention, please." The room slowly fell silent. "Today I brought a gift for those with a head." The pianist stopped. Conversations died down. The projector came on with a dull click. On the screen appeared a large equation full of symbols, long integrals, Greek letters, summations, thin arrows connecting blocks. To many, it looked like a strange drawing. To a few, a maze. "Undo this," Richard said, pacing, hands behind his back, "is a problem my consultants have been racking their brains over for weeks. Award-winning people. Expensive people." He laughed. "And so far, nothing." The guests looked at each other, some curious, others pretending to understand. A businessman asked softly, "Is it physics, pure mathematics?" A woman replied, narrowing her eyes. And a tough one." Richard raised his hand, pleased with the attention. "I love seeing how intelligence separates people." He walked over to the screen and pointed to a section with his finger. "Only brilliant minds can even comprehend what's going on here." Someone whispered, "Here comes the show." Another laughed, "He likes to test the audience." Anna, from the kitchen doorway, wiped her hands on her apron. Her heart sank. She searched for her son with her eyes. Gabriel was half hidden behind the partition, notebook on his lap, pencil between his fingers. He didn't blink. It was as if the numbers were calling to him. Richard changed the slide. Another wall of symbols appeared, with arrows, footnotes, hypotheses. "Look at these 3 blocks," he explained confidently, like a professor who knows more than the class. "My consultant's mistake was trying to push the problem through here." He marked it with a red laser. "I told them, brute force is useless. We lack vision." There was a giggle in the room. The speech was sweet, but clipped. "So let's play," he continued. "Whoever gives me a good clue, just one clue, gets my most expensive bottle. Whoever gets the structure right gets something better." Questions arose. "Is there a single answer?" "Not exactly," Richard replied, satisfied with the mystery. "There are paths, but no one has found one that closes." The screen remained frozen in that almost state. It was like a safe opened at 1%, no longer turning. The air grew heavy at the door. Anna whispered to herself, without knowing why, "Don't look, Gabriel. Stay quiet, son." He bit his lip. The projector's light streaked across his face. A gleam shone in his eyes. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening to a low voice. He ran his thumb along the side of the notebook, where the page formed a dog ear. Richard walked down the line of guests. "Tell me, where do you start?" Silence. Timid coughs. A hesitant attempt. "Maybe multiply by an adjustment factor." Richard smiled curtly. "I tried that the first day. It sinks in 10 steps. Next, no one else took the risk. The air conditioning seemed too loud. The jewelry, the ties, the expensive perfume, everything seemed small against the screen. Gabriel turned 2 pages of his notebook. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His pencil scribbled on the paper, an arrow, a parenthesis, and if, then. His heart beat faster, but his head felt light. The pieces fit together inside him like magnets. "It's funny," Richard said, savoring his own words. "Sometimes the answer is right here." He touched his chest. "But most people just look here." He pointed to the screen. Richard returned to the center and, with that spectacle-like tone, concluded, "My team is tired. The best names are exhausted. Maybe the whole city is tired too, but not me. I like the impossible." He smiled. Does anyone else like it? Gabriel closed the notebook. He squeezed it tightly. He took a deep breath. He felt a warmth in his face, a courage that had no name. The words came alone, low, but clear. He raised his hand. His voice trailed off. I know how to solve this. It was like a drop falling into a still lake, small, but heard by everyone. Heads turned simultaneously. Eyes were shining on him like headlights. The boy took a half step back but didn't lower his hand. What is it? Richard asked, narrowing his eyes. Gabriel took another breath. I know how to fix it. A light murmur ran through the tables. Who is that? Is he the cook's son? You've got to be joking. Anna froze. She took 2 steps and stood between the kitchen and the living room, not daring to go in, not daring to go back. Gabriel, she called in a low voice, heard only by him. Son, don't do that. He didn't answer. He just kept his hand raised. The pencil still clutched between his fingers, the tip dirty with graphite. I thought of a different path, he said more firmly. A path no one has tried. Richard tilted his head, curious and instinctively irritated at the same time. A path, he repeated, savoring the word. Let me get this straight. You understand what's on my screen? Gabriel nodded, a tiny movement. I think so. The room held its breath. The projector hummed. The wall clock struck a full minute that felt like a year. Richard descended 2 steps toward the center aisle. Say it again, he said, unsmiling. I know how to fix it. The billionaire stopped 3 steps away from the boy. He jutted his chin slightly forward, his blue eyes fixed, as if sizing up someone he didn't know. His voice was low, but it carried through the entire room. You know! A great, loud, widespread laugh that rose up through the chandeliers and echoed back across the marble. Glasses clinked as if someone had told a joke. The kitchen boy. A man in a grey suit scoffed, holding back laughter with his hand. Please, the gardener will be able to do it soon, said another, drawing laughter from the neighbouring table. A lady with a pearl necklace tilted her fan and whispered with sour contempt, the little stove genius. Richard let his laughter grow. He watched like someone conducting a cruel orchestra. He took 2 steps, turned to face the audience, and then, in a clear, ironic voice, cast the bait, Since we have a volunteer, let's play a game. Pause. Eyes on Gabriel. If you solve it, I'll pay your mother the same way I pay my scientists. But if you fail, you both walk away penniless. The room changed its tone. Laughter turned to a rustle of anticipation. A low, ooh, echoed around the tables. Someone whispered, "Go!" as if a fight was about to begin. Another nudged his friend. "This will be quick." Anna felt her legs weaken. The cloth of her apron grew damp in her hands. She took 2 steps forward, through the kitchen door, and into the dining room as if treading a minefield. "Mr. Moreau, please." Her voice trembled, but came out, "He's just a boy." "Don't do this." Richard didn't look at her. The corner of his mouth returned. Cold. "Hush. Cook. Your son asked for the stage. Let's give it to him." Heads turned to Anna, and a few crooked smiles sliced through her. "Go back to the stove," a guest snapped, unsure of his cruelty. "Education is at home," a woman said, fiddling with her earring as if it were nothing. "This is dinner, not daycare." Anna swallowed. For a moment, she seemed smaller than her own shadow. She looked at Gabriel, her eyes pleading, "No, son, not now." "Mom," he said softly, without letting go of the notebook. "Let's go," she whispered. "Please." But the room wanted a show. The pianist, unsure of what to do, rested his hands in his lap. Waiters froze in mid-stride, trays suspended in mid-air. At the main table, 2 executives began whispering bets. 10 minutes until he freezes. 3. Richard lightly tapped his knuckles on the tabletop, drawing attention again. "Simple rules," he announced, almost happily. "The equation is on the screen. The painting is yours. If you reach a valid structure, we'll pay like adults. If you stumble, I'll cancel the house's charity." "That's unfair," Anna said, taking a step. "You're using my son to show that life is hard." Richard interrupted, without raising his voice. "And that promises are kept, even foolish ones." A sharp laugh burst from the background. "Look at that kid's courage." "Courage," retorted another. "It's insolence." Gabriel breathed. His hands were sweating. The notebook was damp at the spine. He looked around, and everything seemed distant. The expensive flowers, the enormous paintings, the strong perfumes. The only sounds that made sense were the hum of the projector and his own heartbeat. "I can do it," he murmured. "No," Anna tried again, her voice breaking this time. "They don't want an answer, Gabriel. They want to see you fall." He lifted his face. His eyes held a gleam of gentle stubbornness. "Let me try, Mother." There was a painful silence. A waiter swallowed. Someone stopped laughing mid-laugh. The sentence hung in the air, clean, unadorned. "Let me try, Mom." Richard spread his arms wide, as if presenting a theatre stage. "The whole mansion is watching," he said, satisfied. "Don't waste our time." The humiliation took new forms. A man raised his glass to Anna in a wicked toast. "To the new mathematician in the house." She looked away. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, as if she were gasping for air. "Aren't you ashamed?" she managed to ask, her voice already hoarse. "He's a child. He's my son, and I have a reputation to protect," Richard replied dryly. "Either he proves it, or you're out." From the side corridor, some employees watched helplessly. The waitress bit her lip to keep from crying. The security guard, motionless, stared at the ground. It was as if everyone knew something bad was about to happen, but no one had the courage to stop it. "So," a guest teased, a lazy smile on his face. "Given up, little one?" Gabriel closed his fingers around the pencil. The stub hurt his palm. The fear was there, all there, but there was something else, greater, an old desire to hide no longer. He took a step, then another. The blackboard in the library reflected a pale rectangle of light. The chalk rested silently on the shelf, waiting for hands. The marble floor felt too cold for small feet. Anna reached for him. "Gabriel, please, look at me." He turned for a moment. He saw his mother's face, wet with tears and a mixture of pride, and he said in a thin voice that no longer trembled, "I'll try." "For us." Richard tilted his head, curious as a cat. "Great. After all, I promised to pay the genius's mother handsomely." The laugh returned, this time shorter, crueler, or nothing. The entire room leaned forward, as if the room had become smaller. The whispered bets ceased. The piano remained silent. The screen, with its symbols, glowed like a lit challenge. Gabriel paused on the line between the carpet and the library floor. His heart was still pounding, but his gaze was steady. He raised his hand, not to ask for silence. Silence was already his, but to reach for the chalk. Gabriel picked up the chalk. His small fingers touched the white tip carefully, as if holding something fragile. The dust rose slightly, glistening in the library light. He took 2 steps and stopped before the blackboard. For a second, no one breathed. "Go on, little genius," someone said, laughing nervously. Gabriel didn't answer. He touched the chalk to the board. Tick! The sound pierced the entire room. The first line appeared clean and straight, then the second. There was no rush. There was no trembling. He wrote as if he'd already done it 1,000 times in his head. "He's really writing," whispered one of the guests, embarrassed. Richard crossed his arms, forcing a smile that didn't match his gaze. With each stroke, the smile faded a little. Anna, at the edge of the rug, clutched the apron between her fingers. Her heart pounded in her throat. Gabriel organized the problem into blocks. He surrounded 3 parts with simple rectangles and numbered them. 1, 2, 3. "First, separate what's confusing," he said quietly, more to himself than to the others. "Then connect what makes sense." The chalk ran. He swapped the positions of 2 expressions, rewrote a term, opened a parenthesis, and closed another. Arrows, small notes. "If," then There was no pretty drawing, there was clarity. The board began to take shape. "That's not a guess," muttered a woman with glasses, leaning forward to get a better look. "He dismantled the mistake," replied another, almost voiceless. The laughter that had filled the room a moment before faded. A noisy silence remained. All that could be heard was the scraping of chalk and the pent-up breathing of those who, once eager for a spectacle, now didn't know where to put their hands. Richard stepped forward. "Go on," he said quietly. Gabriel continued. He made a brief substitution. He cancelled two identical terms that no one had seen before. He simplified the monster until it fit on one line. He circled block 2. He took a breath. He looked at the screen for a second, considered a hypothesis, and nodded to himself. He returned to the board. "If I look from another angle," he said, pulling out a new arrow, "here it opens." Open. The word hung in the air, and it did open. The path that seemed closed became clear. One step, then another, then another. Anna put her hand to her mouth. A waiter, without noticing, lowered his tray and stood there, mouth agape. "My God," someone said. The chalk paused for a moment. Gabriel looked up and measured the distance to the final result. He smiled faintly, almost invisibly. He began writing again. Now the board had a sequence that even a layman could follow. Beginning, middle, end. He aligned the terms, added what was needed, and eliminated the excess. The path closed like a lid on a jar. Richard frowned. His hands, once steady, showed signs of impatience. So Gabriel took his time. He checked an equality. He adjusted an exponent. He drew a final line, straight as a ruler. Below, he wrote the answer in simple handwriting. He circled it. Period. The chalk slipped from his fingertips and fell onto the shelf with a loud thud. Silence. There was no more laughter, no more jokes, just eyes. So many eyes, eyes that had seen the impossible, happening right in front of them. The woman with glasses took a step closer, without touching the board. She followed the arrows with her gaze, line by line. She bit her lip in surprise. He closed it from above and from inside, she said in amazement. He cut the shortcut that was blocking everyone. A man behind her shook his head in disbelief. "Yeah, it's in one piece." Anna cried quietly, clean tears, without drama. Her chest heaved slowly, as if finally breathing. "My son," she said in a whisper. Gabriel turned. There was no provocation on his face. There was no vanity, only calm. There, the word hit home. Done, simple, final, real. The screen still showed the projected puzzle, but the board showed the way out. The projector continued to buzz. Useless. The solution was no longer on the screen. It was in the chalk. "He solved it," whispered one guest, as if afraid of scaring away the truth. "In minutes?" added another, unsure of where to put his hands. Richard opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His face hardened for a second, then softened. This wasn't a joke. It wasn't a challenge. It was a silence. Gabriel shyly wiped the chalk dust off his pants. He looked back at the path he'd traced. If he needed to, he'd do it again. But he didn't need to. The board spoke for itself. A light breeze blew through the library curtains, stirring a small piece of paper stuck to a book. The entire room seemed different, as if the walls had shifted. The invisible boy now occupied the center. Where there had been mockery, there was now space. Where there had been noise, there was now respect, even if no one had the courage to applaud yet. "How did you—" a man began, without finishing. "What was that about?" asked another, pointing to the part where Gabriel opened the problem. "He saw what no one else saw," said the woman with glasses, simply. Gabriel didn't make a speech. He didn't explain further. There was no need. The painting explained it. The impossible equation was solved. He took a step back, then another. His eyes searched for his mother. He found her. Anna nodded, her smile wet. The boy took a deep breath, like someone returning to the surface after a long dive. The silence was still heavy when Anna took a step forward. Her hands were shaking, but her voice came out. first thin, then firm, as if finding support in her own chest. "Do you want to know who this boy is?" She pointed at Gabriel, her eyes shining. "I'll tell you." Some guests shifted in their chairs. No one laughed, no one dared. The library seemed to breathe with her. "Gabriel taught himself," she began. "It wasn't at an expensive school. It wasn't at a famous course. It was at home, when the house had electricity. And when it didn't, he learned with a street vendor's flashlight that kept failing." She took a breath, swallowed hard. There was never any money left for a new book, so he'd take old sheets, used notebooks, torn magazines. Everything became a notebook. He'd write in the margins, on the back, between the lines. I'd say, "Son, this page is already full." And he'd reply, "There's room for more, Mom. There's always room for a little more." A man in the back cleared his throat, not daring to interrupt. Anna continued, her voice now warm, full of images. "There was a rainy night when we put a pan on the floor to drip. The ceiling went knock, 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 and he, on his stomach on the cold floor, copied out accounts with his pencil on the little stump. I'd come home from the mansion with the smell of grease on my clothes, my feet aching, and find that little sound of the flashlight scraping against the table. 'Son, go to sleep,' he'd reply. 'Just 5 more minutes, Mom.' He smiled slightly, remembering. Those 5 minutes turned into an hour, 2, and when the battery ran out, he'd take the flashlight apart, blow on it, tap it gently, and it would come back on, dim, yellow. But it would come on. Some eyes sparkled. The waitress at the door held back tears. Anna continued, "We counted coins to pay the rent. I worked odd jobs on the weekends. I washed molds, polished pans, peeled bags of onions. I'd come back with burning fingers, but happy to see his notebook fuller than yesterday. 'Mom, I found a shorter way to do the same thing,' he'd say, showing me arrows and parentheses. I didn't understand a thing, but I understood the joy, and we recognized joy." She glanced quickly at Richard, without challenge, without fear, just truth. When the power went out, he didn't complain. He said, "It's quieter. I can think better," I cried, hiding in the bathroom so he wouldn't see. He didn't. He grabbed the flashlight and continued. Anna reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, wrinkled from opening and closing it so often. This was a shopping list. I crossed off rice, beans, eggs. He used the back for practice. She held up the sheet so everyone could see the cramped numbers. "Every bill here is a no. We received and turned into go ahead anyway." A professor among the guests adjusted his glasses, touched. The lady with the fan lowered her fan. There were days when Gabriel would walk with me to the school gate and back because there was no room. There were days when he'd asked to stand at the public library door just to browse the books. When a neighbor threw away an old book, he'd be as happy as if he'd just received an expensive toy. He'd come home with a sore arm and say, "Mum, there's something here I don't know yet." And I'd reply, "Then you'll find out tomorrow." She looked at her son, and her voice lost its tremor. I never managed to buy him the backpack he wanted, but he never asked for it again. He only asked for paper and batteries, and he'd say, "Mum, if the electricity goes out, I'll make it myself." A discreet murmur of astonishment ran through her. Anna took a deep breath, searching for air deep within her soul. "I don't come to ask for pity," he said simply. "Pity weighs heavily and delays. I come to ask for respect, because when you laughed at him, it wasn't just the boy you laughed at. It was the dim flashlight that kept his head lit. It was the patched notebook that became a book. It was my detergent-cracked hands that paid for each page on sale. The words remained on the wood of the tables, on the paintings, on the glasses." Anna took another step, gently, firmly. "Gabriel isn't just a genius. Genius sounds like something out of a movie. He's a survivor of scarcity, of the roar of laughter that tried to silence dreams, of the 'you can't' repeated in lines, at counters, at the door. He got through it all with a short pencil and long courage." She closed her hand over the crumpled sheet, as if guarding a treasure. "If anyone here has any doubts, look at the board." He pointed to the solution. And look at me. I am living proof that this boy taught himself. I saw it, night after night. Without light, without a new book, without applause, just desire. A pause. Today you saw the beautiful ending. I saw the ugly beginning. And that's why I say, respect. No one answered. The projector's humming sound seemed to fade. The piano remained motionless. The strong perfume faded into the background, and what remained in front was the image of the simple house, the leaking pot, the boy blowing on the lantern and saying, "There's room for one more piece." Anna lowered her hands, her voice soft now, almost a hug. He didn't come to prove he's better than anyone else. He came to prove he can do it too, that there's a place for those who never had one. If you're going to laugh, laugh at me because I'm an adult and I can handle it, but respect my son, because what he did today, he practiced in the dark. Her eyes filled up again, but the smile remained, a small, clean smile that said, "I knew it." The library remained silent, heads lowered here and there, eyes exchanged, speechless. No one applauded, no one dared break the weight of that truth. Only Gabriel, who took a step toward his mother and, without saying a word, rested his forehead against hers. The equation on the board shone less than the two of them. "That's it," Anna concluded softly. "He's not just a genius, he's a survivor of scarcity, and yet he chose to be light." Richard stood up slowly. He ran his hand over his jacket as if trying to remove a weight that wasn't made of fabric. His usual smile didn't appear. His expensive watch gleamed, but his eyes didn't. He walked to the center of the room, stared at the blackboard, then at the boy. He swallowed his pride. His voice trailed off. He cleared his throat, continuing, "I underestimated you." A murmur ran through the tables. The lady with the fan lowered her fan. The pianist, without playing, inclined his head. Richard took a step closer. He looked Gabriel over completely, without mockery, without haste. "You're brilliant. I want you on my curriculum." The sentence hung in the air, clear as water. Anna brought her hands to her face. Gabriel blinked, unsure where to look. "Are you serious?" he asked softly. "Yes," Richard replied simply. "No tricks, no jokes. I want you studying with my team. Access to the library, the lab, your own tutor, no hidden favors. It's an investment." A guest tried to joke. "Are they going to give the kitchen boy a lab coat?" Richard turned his face, hard, and interrupted. "They're going to give him a future." Anna took a breath, her voice like a warm wind. "He always wanted to really study. I just couldn't." "Now he can," Richard said, turning to her, a little awkwardly. "But only if you agree." Gabriel looked at his mother. The two understood each other in an instant. He took a step, held the notebook against his chest, and said, "I want it." Richard nodded. He stepped closer, extended his hand. Gabriel hesitated, then shook the billionaire's hand, small hand, big hand. The gesture was simple, but it seemed to change the room. "Tomorrow morning," Richard said. "I'll wait for you in my office. No suit, no party, just studying." "Tomorrow morning," Gabriel repeated, with a shy smile that finally appeared. Anna grabbed her son's arm, overcome with emotion. "Thank you." She searched for the right name. "Not doctor, not sir." "Thank you, Richard." He looked away for a moment, embarrassed. "I'm the one who thanks you," he said sincerely. "You reminded me of what I had forgotten, that intelligence has no address." Some guests began to clap, timidly, as if learning to clap again. It wasn't concert applause, it was applause of respect. Richard took a deep breath, feeling his own ground. "From today on," he added, staring at the painting, "I want to be on the right side of this story." Gabriel smiled at his mother, and she returned it with a quick, tight hug that said, "Go." The boy nodded, brushed the chalk dust off his pants, and put away his notebook. For the first time in that house, he didn't feel like an intruder. He felt invited. On the board, The solution remained clear. In the air, the promise of a new routine, less mocking laughter, more blank pages, and in Richard's expression, the first sign of someone willing to learn together. "Let's begin," he said softly, almost to himself. And the night, which began as a show, turned into a commitment. The next day, the town was talking about only one thing: the boy who solved the impossible equation. Headlines, short videos, hasty comments. At the mansion's door, curious onlookers took photos of the gate, as if the iron told a story. Inside, however, the mood was different. Heavy, suspicious, cold. Richard walked down the hallway with his cell phone in hand, reading messages from investors and directors. Caution, fact-check and avoid scandal. He stopped in the library, stared at the whiteboard still bearing traces of the results, and closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, Dr. Howard Kessler was already there. Howard had the pale skin of someone who's had little sleep and the shriveled pride of someone who's lost the stage. Thick glasses, a hard mouth, and a wrinkled suit. He didn't greet anyone. He came in shooting. "That's a farce," he said dryly. "That boy copied it." Richard held her gaze, his voice measured. "Be careful what you say." "Copied," he repeated, louder. "I recognize half of the approach. They're excerpts from restricted articles, internal circulars, conjectures that haven't even been published. There's no way a kitchen boy could have invented that." Anna, carrying a tray of coffee, stopped at the door. Gabriel followed behind, his notebook pressed to his chest. Her heart sank, but she entered. "Doctor, weren't you there yesterday?" she asked without irony. "You saw him do it, line by line." Howard turned to her, irritated. "Seeing isn't understanding. Anyone can copy someone else's line. I want to know where the idea came from." Gabriel took a deep breath. "From here." He pointed to his head simply. "I just saw the path." Howard laughed shortly, without humor. "I saw the way? How beautiful. You know what? I demand to see you create, not repeat, create." Richard crossed his arms, his face, once embarrassed, now heavy. "What do you suggest?" "A panel," Howard snapped. "University professors. New problems, constructed on the spot. No clues, no ready-made screens. I want to see if the genius can walk without crutches." Anna took a step, nervous but firm. "My son is not a circus clown." "Nobody said anything about the circus," Howard replied coldly. "We're talking about the test. If he's really all that, it won't be difficult, will it?" He looked at Gabriel sharply. "Or will it?" Gabriel lowered his eyes for a moment. Fear came like a cold wind and passed. "If it's fair, I accept it." "No!" Anna reacted immediately. "Enough humiliation, Gabriel." He turned to her, meekly. "Mom, I know what I'm doing." Richard gripped the edge of the table tensely. "Howard, do you realize the weight of this? If you're wrong, you destroy a boy. If you're right, you destroy me." "I know my name," the scientist replied, "and how it was thrown in the trash last night." Silence. The clock on the wall counted 10 seconds, as if it were 10 minutes. Richard let go of the edge of the table and walked to the window. Outside, photographers were arguing with the security guard. He returned, calmer. "Okay, I'll talk to the dean. An impartial panel, unprecedented problems, full room, no tricks." He looked at Gabriel. "Are you sure?" "I have." Anna ran her hand over her face, trying to wipe away the anxiety like someone wiping away sweat. "Son, they don't want the truth. They want to see you fall." "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm going to stand." Howard lifted his chin, victorious in anticipation. "Tomorrow, 9 in the morning, clean slate, clock ticking. Let's see if the legend breathes outside the story they invented." "Nobody invented anything," Anna replied, tired but firm. "My son studied with a flashlight. You studied with a light. That's the difference." Howard bit back his answer and preferred silence. He adjusted his jacket, picked up an envelope and placed it on Richard's desk. "I've listed possible topics. I won't say which ones will be used. Don't accuse me of setting up. I want his method, not the final number." Richard took the envelope without opening it. "That's enough for today." and to Gabriel, "Go rest. Your head needs sleep too." In the hallway, Anna walked beside her son, her steps short, her breathing heavy. "We can say no," she insisted. "No one can control our yes." Gabriel held her hand. "I know, but if I don't go, they'll keep asking me that question. Everywhere." He stopped, looked into her eyes. "I don't want to live in hiding." "What if it goes wrong?" The question came out in a whisper, as if ashamed to exist. "We'll go back to the lantern," he replied with a half smile, "and try again." Anna laughed, sad and proud at the same time. "You sound like a grown-up. I only speak as your son." In the living room, Richard was left alone with the envelope. He ran his fingers along the flap but didn't open it. Instead, he stared at the faded board. He remembered Anna's words, "Pity weighs heavily and delays," and Gabriel's small hand squeezing his. The phone vibrated. It was the dean, he answered. "We need impartiality," he said bluntly, "and we need to protect a child. Risk taxes." The dean replied on the other side, "I guarantee method. The rest is math." Richard hung up and sat down. For the first time, he didn't feel in control, and that hurt, but it also opened up space for something new, responsibility. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken, heavy clouds advancing over the city. Anna and Gabriel took their usual bus. Sitting together, the window fogged up. She rested her head on his shoulder. "If you're scared, tell me," he said. "I'll tell you. If you want to stop, we'll stop. I'll let you know. If it hurts, we'll breathe." We breathe. The bus rattled on. Gabriel opened his notebook and didn't write anything. He just flipped through the used pages, one by one, as if remembering where he came from. On the last one, he drew a small square and wrote in the center, "Calm down." The next morning, before the sun was high, the university was already crowded at the door. Cameras, students, curious onlookers. The committee gathered in a meeting room, preparing problems that hadn't existed hours before. The blackboard in the amphitheater was clean and shining. The clock was ready to start counting. But for now, it was just the weight of waiting. "It'll work out," Anna said, squeezing her son's hand. "It'll work out," Gabriel repeated, more to himself than to himself. And the world, once again, held its breath. The university looked like a stone castle. Tall doors, echoing hallways, stained glass windows, leaving stains of color on the floor. At the entrance to the amphitheater, a large clock read 8:59. The hand clinked softly, as if warming the audience. Gabriel entered, his notebook pressed to his chest. Anna followed, breathing shallowly, eyes steady. Richard stopped in the doorway, surveyed the size of the room, and stood, inconspicuous. Teachers whispered around a long table. In the center, the blackboard, intact, clean, waiting. "Gentlemen," said the grey-haired teacher, tapping her pencil on the table. "New problems, constructed just now. No consultation, no screen." She turned to Gabriel. "Breathe, and do it your way." Howard Kessler adjusted his thick, dry glasses. Timed. The first teacher stood up and wrote quickly. Symbols, sums, a curious condition at the end, almost malicious. 20 minutes, he said, setting the chalk down on the shelf. The amphitheater fell silent. Gabriel approached the chalkboard. He touched the edge with his fingertips, as if testing the temperature of water. He picked up the chalk. Tick. The sound traveled throughout the room. "First I separate the noise," he murmured, marking 2 blocks with simple lines. He made a change of variable. He cancelled a term that seemed stuck on with glue. The grey-haired teacher leaned forward in surprise. "He opened a window where we could only see wall," a teacher whispered. Howard grumbled. "That doesn't prove anything." Gabriel didn't listen. He continued. His hand turned white with dust. The sequence gained rhythm. His eyes ran from beginning to end, back, checking. In 15 minutes, he circled a result and underlined it. Closed. A murmur ran through the ranks. The grey-haired woman calmly checked the lines. Next. The second professor came as if casting a net. A dense system, 3 layers, a trick hidden in the middle. 30 minutes, he warned, pressing the stopwatch. Gabriel read silently. He wrote a short line, then another. It was as if he were drawing a map. "And if you go over it, it sinks." He shook his head. "I'll go under it." He shifted his grip. The chalk slid faster. One teacher took off his jacket, another, the sweat from his brow. Whispers broke out. He cut the ribbon. No, he moved the knot. Howard bit his lip. "I want to see it close." Gabriel tested a borderline case, erased 2 letters and replaced them. "Now we go." The final equality appeared clean, like glass. He circled it. There you go." The clock showed 11 minutes to spare. The silence grew heavier. It wasn't hostility. It was a growing respect, shy, suspicious. "Third problem," said the grey-haired woman, this time with a different voice. "Let's create one here, a different challenge." She, 2 other teachers, and Howard discussed it in quick whispers. They created a strange creature on the board, with a frightening boundary condition. 25 minutes. Gabriel leaned his face closer to the board. His hands were behind his back, his posture one of listening. "The path isn't straight." He spoke softly. "It's curved." He drew an arrow around the center. He made a substitution no one else had tried. The audience leaned in, as if their bodies were trying to understand along with their heads. "That's not going to—" Howard began. He stopped. "Is it?" "And it is," the grey-haired woman said, almost smiling. Gabriel created an auxiliary identity, 3 lines. He proved it. He pushed the result back to the big problem. It fit. The air changed. That difficult piece, which seemed like a rock, became a step. He climbed it. "It won't be long now," he said to himself. The chalk broke in half with a sharp click. The room jumped. Gabriel picked up half and continued, as if nothing had happened. 2 more passes. An elegant cancellation, a well-placed limit. "Close it here." He closed it. He circled it with a rectangle. He stopped. He looked at the stall, his eyes calm, a slight smile. "Check it out." The teacher walked slowly to the board. She read it. She reread it. She mentally rewrote one of the passages. "That's correct." Another teacher raised his finger. "And it's beautiful." The students in the back row glanced at each other, subdued. One of them let out a low "damn." A girl clenched her hand into a fist, hidden in her lap. Dr. Howard Kessler broke the silence, his voice sharp. "That doesn't prove anything. He must have memorized passages." His laugh was harsh. "Creative coincidence." "I've seen that." The grey-haired teacher raised her hand, asking for order. "Gabriel, please explain this passage here, from auxiliary identity to final reduction." In simple terms, he took a step. He pointed to the board with the chalk. "I changed my perspective. Instead of pushing the bead, I aligned the pattern. When the terms look at the same place, they move together. Then we close without forcing." A short professor took off his glasses in surprise. "They go together." "I like that. That's what it says, only in human language." Howard insisted, blushing. He copied from internal articles. "I recognize the idea." "Which articles?" the grey-haired woman asked firmly. "Confidential," he stammered. "Research circulars, which you can't name," another professor added dryly, "and which anyway weren't here. These problems were created on the spot, in front of everyone," the audience murmured. A student in the front row whispered, "So there was no way he could have cheated." "There was no way," replied the student next to him, without taking his eyes off the board. Howard tried another route, but this maneuver, this trick, it smells like a shortcut. Gabriel took a deep breath and made a second path to the side. Short, clean, and it achieved the same result. No shortcut, just another road. The grey-haired woman slowly considered both paths. She put the chalk back on the shelf, faced the microphone, and her voice came out clear, unembellished. He didn't copy anything. He created original solutions that even we hadn't considered. The amphitheater erupted. First a gasp, then applause that grew like a wave. Clapping nearby, clapping far away, echoes hitting the ceiling and returning warmly. A loud whistle. "Bravo!" In the middle, Anna brought her hands to her face and cried, smiling. Gabriel blinked rapidly, swallowing a sweet lump in his throat. Howard stepped back, pale. A professor approached him, low and direct. "You accused without proof. Here, proof is what counts." Howard opened his mouth, closed it, lowered his eyes, unmasked, without a platform, without an excuse. Richard remained seated for a second longer. The man of parties and loud laughter took a deep breath, stood slowly, and asked for the microphone with a curt gesture. The applause faded until it became an attentive silence. He looked at the painting. He looked at Gabriel. He looked at Anna. The expensive suit weighed no more than the sentence that needed to come out. "I was wrong." The confession lightened the air. "I underestimated a boy and the story that came with him." He turned to the audience, without drama. "This boy is the future." The applause returned, louder, warmer, with laughter of relief in between. The teacher clapped too. The students stood. A security guard smiled involuntarily. Anna met her son's gaze and nodded, saying everything without saying anything. Gabriel lowered his head, shy, and smiled a little. The grey-haired woman concluded, addressing the class, "Committee's record. Original problems, solved using their own method, clear explanations, and valid alternatives." She gestured respectfully to Gabriel. "Thank you for reminding us that intelligence is also courage." A short hiss came from the microphone. Overhead, the clock struck the hour. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Inside, chalk dust settled slowly on a chalkboard that now looked like a display case. There was no more mockery. There was no more coincidence. There was a result. There was dignity. Richard handed the microphone back, never shying away from his own face. Howard sat down, smaller than his lab coat. Anna descended 2 steps but stopped. It was her son's moment. And Gabriel, standing in the center, breathed like someone finishing a marathon. Tired, light, whole. The following week, the envelope arrived early. Gabriel tore it open carefully, read it twice, and let out a shy laugh. "Mom, it's a full scholarship." Anna squeezed her son. "I knew your flashlight would illuminate a lot of things." That same week, Richard showed up without entourage, briefcase in hand. No speeches, housing, books, transportation, mentor. It's a commitment. Anna crossed her arms. "Partnership, not favor." "Partnership," he confirmed, lowering his tone. The neighborhood gained a simple sign, "Cozy Anna," food with care. New oven, the smell of bread, a line on the sidewalk. "Is salt okay?" Anna asked. "Hugs okay," the first customer replied, smiling with her eyes. At night, the tables became notebooks. A small blackboard hung on the wall, and colored chalk lay in a jar. "What if I make a mistake?" a boy asked. "We'll try again," Gabriel said. "Failure's a practice." Richard walked by later, shirt tucked into his forearm, suit removed. "I've created a backdrop. Ticket, supplies, bag. I want doors open." Anna pointed to the board. "And people inside." "And people inside," he repeated sincerely. On campus, Gabriel discovered the library that walks by itself. "Mom, there are books that open and seem to talk. So listen, my son," she laughed over the phone. "Tell me later." Closing the month's cash register, Anna smiled at the honest numbers. "Little and clean," she said. Gabriel rested his head on her shoulder. "It's a lot when it's ours." End of story.